So if you're like me and you love to modify your Subaru, this is my 2022 WRX, it's tuned, it's my 4th WRX. You might know that these cars have a massive aftermarket community and there's lots of parts that you can put on them. But with that said, there are some hidden costs to certain mods for the WRXs and STIs of all years. And in today's video, we're gonna take a deep dive on the hidden costs of what some of the mods that you might install on your Subaru could actually cost you financially, death of an engine, death of a transmission, lots of money, lots of time. There are so many things that everyone installs on their cars that you might not know that will destroy your car or destroy your wallet. So we're gonna hop into the WRX, we're gonna take it for a drive, and we're gonna talk about literally everything you need to know. No matter what year WRX or STI you drive, we're gonna jump into it. And I'll see you guys in a second. And don't forget to subscribe, guys. Like the video if you learned something, and let me know if I missed anything in the comment section below. And we're gonna talk about everything from engine mods to the sealant that you put under your car to protect it from rust. That's an easy one. It seals the liquid and the moisture into the car and can actually do a lot more damage. To actually rust protect these cars, which you don't actually really need, to actually rust protect them, it's actually a little bit more work than you'd actually think. But that is beside the point. Okay, so let's start with engine. Actually, let's start with suspension. We'll go to engine and then we'll go to all-around mods. So suspension, basically anything that you do to change your suspension is going to have a cost no matter what you do across the board, unless you change everything in your suspension. Now hear me out and let me actually explain the physics. So typically when you change things with your suspension, you're either looking to go softer or harder. You're not replicating your stock suspension because you wouldn't necessarily get that many performance gains. And even if you were to get the performance gains or replicating your stock suspension and damper rates, you're not going to feel them, and most of us aren't racing these cars for a living, so there's no reason to do that. Whether you go softer or harder, it applies in both ways. You change the frequency of vibration when the car makes impacts with things. Now, the rest of your suspension, outside of your coilovers, are designed for certain frequency. The rubber gasketing, the joints, everything is just designed for a different frequency. So when you change that frequency, most importantly, when you get to a tighter when you get to a harder dampening rate, you run through aspects of your car faster. A classic example is bearings, joints, knuckles, just go and need to be replaced sooner. And this actually can be pretty soon. A great example is if you run a really good set of aftermarket coilovers. And again, the better the set, the more damage you're gonna have, but it's because you're getting the most performance out of it. If you run let's get a little second gear in here. Is there any? I'm working on getting a camera. There will be a camera eventually for you guys to see my speedometer, because we're definitely driving in the wooded area of Northeast Boston in Mexico. But that's beside the point. So if you get a really good set of coilovers, you're going to have to replace likely aspects of your transmission after every 30, 40,000 miles. Same thing goes with basically anything you do. Camber, any types of suspension mods. Unless you replace everything to work with everything, you're going to wear through your suspension more quickly. The useful life of the parts will drop, and you're going to have to do more intervals of maintenance. And that's basically everything with suspension. The only time that you don't really have that is with wheels. If you get wheels that are balanced correctly, then that works. But remember, with these cars, because they're all-wheel drive, if you don't get an alignment often, you can do a lot of damage to your suspension anyways, because these cars run out of alignments quickly and they do damage very quickly without a balanced alignments. Okay, engine modifications, which all of you guys are here for. So we're going to talk first blow-off valves. Blow-off valves with the EJ and the FA motors, unless you go with really, really expensive design, killer beheaders, all that kind of stuff. Quite typically, these cars cannot vac ambient pressure or air. They need to be full recirc. Now, if you do anything but full recirc, you're going to have issues with timing, air-fuel ratios, ignition, fueling, you name it. You're going to cause a lot of issues. You're also going to be a lot less protected around knock events, and if you have something like bad gas, you can quickly cause pretty severe knock events because you're just going to have less optimal running conditions. One step further, if you go with an aftermarket recirc valve, you need to go with one that has basically a high volume of sales. It is very, very common in the aftermarket world. I run an aftermarket part business, that you find people going with like the cheaper option or a less used brand, and it actually does cause some damage, or they have ignition issues, start issues. They're starting to see some leaning out. They're basically just having issues. You go with a bigger name brand that's had some real testing done with the tuning, and then you get fine. But you really, this is one of those ones that you want to spend the money to get the right thing, and you really have to want it to take the risk, is my opinion. I will eventually run one. I like the idea of it. I think that the intakes aren't as loud as the VAs on the VB engines for the WRXs, so food for thought. Next thing is intakes. Intakes are evolving where you can run them without tunes. Don't do it. It's just not worth it. I know everybody says it's fine. That the problem is an intake can't add anything to the car if it doesn't need to be tuned. So there's no reason to change the intake if you're not going to tune it. If you're like, you don't get any power out of it because it's not changing anything. And if it's changing anything, you need to tune to adjust for the correct amount of oxygen and air that comes into the engine. So the idea of like, you can run an intake without a tune, yeah, that's great, but you don't want that intake in the first place because it's not doing anything. It's not changing anything. The second is J-pipes. So J-pipes are very much changing around tuning and green speed and the EPA, but it's also just changing around what tuners are willing to work with and what they actually had been kind of like hiding a little bit. Not that that's a negative, but like, you didn't want to see check engine lights all the time. So they opened the bounds of what your car would flag as a problem. And J-pipes are just less tuned with these days. Same thing with catless. So just forget catless. So with WRXs and STIs, no matter what year you are, what engine you have, don't go catless. Boost creep will blow your engine, your turbo, and actually more often than not, when you have big boost creep events and you blow the engine, you're actually probably going to lose the transmission as well, just because the way that they tend to blow, and you actually have the rebound of material, you'll often find long-term or immediate transmission damage. So boost creep is just where you have, well, actually, I'm not going to do a full dive into boost creep because I think that you need to have a bigger discussion with physics, because boost creep has, it's more often you think of boost creep as a surge in boost, but it can also be a vacuum. So you can have it coming kind of in both ways, but essentially catless doesn't work with these cars. No matter how mean they sound, it just doesn't work. The other thing is fueling with ethanol and e-tuning and a blended tune with gas. You really need to run a flex fuel kit. I know a lot of people do really well with e-tune, like with ethanol tuning, where it's just a constant value, but it's really hard to find consistent ethanol value even with ethanol pumps because it's less used, which means it typically sits in the gas tanks more often and you have more of chemical reactions happening and some blow-by of the other fueling, which will cause like condensation, and it's just hard to find like exactly the E30 or E85 or whatever it is perfectly every time. So having a flex fuel sensor, a corresponding fuel pump, and all that stuff will save you from a lot of damage long term. Lastly are intercoolers. Intercoolers they're not necessarily like, it's not necessarily hiding damage, but the hidden cost can actually be the cost of the intercooler. Not all intercoolers are created the same, and I would actually say only about the top 20% of intercoolers in terms of brands and actually options do anything. So you'll find a lot of brands make intercoolers and the size of the core increase is so marginal that you're not going to see any difference, and more importantly, your tuner is not going to be able to increase the power by any amount, and you're not going to have any additional cooling. So intercoolers are not all made the same, and the reality is the hidden cost is actually just the cost of the fact that you are paying for something that's rather expensive and you're not getting anything out of it. Moving on to just like life stuff, you got a lot of mods around the transmission that can actually do a lot of damage. This biker that I'm passing is going 40 plus miles an hour. That is remarkable. You're crushing it, dude. Things like weighted shift knobs, if it's too heavy and stuff like that around, generally your shift boot and your shifter is actually going to be where you're going to cause the most damage. Bad short shifter installations, bad short shifters will actually cause quite a lot of tension where you don't think tension is being built up, and you can actually cause some transmission damage. My favorite is there used to be a company that didn't do a lot of business, but they sold a lot of super heavy weighted shift knobs with the idea that like it's going to take all the effort out of it. And it actually did quite a lot of damage on transmissions because it was doing a lot of damage in the interim where it was putting and applying a lot of force. Your shifter should chatter a little bit, while you're driving. There's a reason you shouldn't leave your hand on your shift knob. You want it to be able to chatter and release some of that mechanical energy that it's going to have as your transmission is doing things. And the weighted shift knobs actually just kind of almost like fighting against that, and not in a good way. That chatter is a good thing. It's releasing energy from a handful of mechanical things that are happening, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It needs to have that ability to chatter a little bit. Now, chatter is probably the wrong word, but I'm using chatter from a physical sense of it needs to move around like this. And then the last thing on our list that I want to talk about is actually like just daily upkeep with these cars. Hidden costs: not running good oil, not running the right kind of oil. Absolutely, you're going to lower the lifespan of your car's engine. Same thing goes with not changing fluids all across the board. So that's going to be engine, all engine fluids, including coolant. I know that they have the Super Blue, which lasts forever. Just make sure you're keeping up with that. If you add any coolant that isn't Super Blue, do a full coolant change. Change your brake fluid every like 50,000 miles. Make sure you flush it. And then do your transmission and gear and diff oil, you know, probably every 30 to 40,000 miles, and your car will be very happy. If you don't do that, that's actually something that these cars are designed to have those intervals of changing. So if you don't do that, it's actually kind of a big deal. So that is really important to do. And then lastly is something that people are going to think is like very low key, but I wanted to talk about it, and I left it last because a lot of you guys are like, this is dumb, but it's paint care and kind of exterior care. Now, this will actually be, could be some of the more expensive things that you deal with, because yes, an engine sucks if you have to replace an engine, but the odds of having to replace the engine are lower relative to having to do some paint correction. And oftentimes people put stuff on the paint on these cars that is well outside of the bound of just paint correction. So great example is just improperly doing a wax or a polish. You know, the paint on Subarus is very thin. The clear coat's even thinner. You will do lasting damage in a way that you cannot paint correct. Paint correction has changed in the last decade. Paint is just so much thinner that you don't have as much buffer to do paint correction as what the age-old saying with paint correction has been. You just can't do it. So it's a big deal. Same thing, bad ceramic coats will actually really damage your car, so just stay away. I actually don't really ceramic coat my vehicles, just because I haven't found a consistently tested ceramic coat brand. There used to be one that I almost started using, but the problem was is I ended up finding out that they buy from multiple suppliers, and all of a sudden it's like, well, then your quality process isn't the same, and bad ceramic coat can do quite a lot of damage. And then lastly, there is quite a large hidden cost to not cleaning your car. You know, whether it's rust, surface rust, material buildup, loss of greased axles, you name it, like bolts swelling and damaging themselves long term to making the car harder to, you know, move. And I know this isn't really a mod, but we're just talking about this because if you guys have stayed this far, this probably adds some value. Clean your damn car and use the right products. But I know that this was mainly supposed to be mods, and I know that we kind of got out of that, but the mods are pretty clear. Suspension hurts you, engine, you know, you don't have that much room to modify, and the rest of it around the transmission, just be a little careful. The rest of it, it's just kind of judge as you go. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.